My name's Annie. Annie Langston-Noel, and I work with Chris at the main Aquaculture Innovation Centre. I also have a small farm, a little oyster farm up near Ellsworth, in Union River Bay. It's very small because I have a busy day job that actually pays me, and the farm is pretty much just a weekend job. And I was asked to come and speak to you by Hannah and Kate to talk about sea farm basics and how you can be a good ambassador for your farm. So that's kind of sounds pretty straightforward, right? And I've got a whole 45 minutes to talk about this. So maybe it's not quite as straightforward as we think. So one of the things that I hear most from other farmers is like, oh yeah, we got this winter, but they just don't turn up, you know? And so that, it sounds like really straightforward, but that is the first thing that you need to think about, is that you need to be there at the time that you're being asked to be there. And why do you think that might be? Why do you think that being timely is important when you're working on the sea? Go for it, shout it out.
Tides.
Tides, yeah. Anything else? Wind, yeah.
We're talking about showing up on time.
Showing up on time. Why is it important to be timely?
So as Annie would say, as an employer, you have 5 people on the crew and you show up 10 minutes late. Well, then that's 50 minutes, four people waiting for 10 minutes. That's 40 minutes payroll you just paid for that 15 minutes. And that's, you know, it could be $100.
Right. So that's a big one. But you're right, the tide and the wind is another big one, right? So if you're late, if you're half an hour late leaving the dock, that's probably half an hour less that you can actually spend at sea. Particularly at this time of year, and in the summer to some extent, you get this phenomenon where you can, in the afternoon, the wind picks up. So the morning is when it's nice and calm, before the air temperature is really warmed up. And when you get this differential between the temperature of the water and the temperature of the land, you can get some wicked winds. And also when that combines with the tide, you've got a tide going out and a wind coming in the other opposite direction, it can make for a really rough ride. And that's when you might have to kind of abandon the operations for the day, or the employers are planning a piece of work that's got to get done before that wind's going to change. So if you're a bit late, that's that time that's taken out of the farm operation. Now, stuff happens for sure, right? People get that. But that's just trying just to reinforce why actually it's not just like an office job where turning up 10 minutes late, you can stay 10 minutes longer. There are impacts to the workflow that can't really be taken back by doing extra 10 minutes at the end of the day. So anyone have any questions about that? It sounds pretty straightforward, right? So preparing for the day, I've put a couple of hints there: clothing, food and drink. So tell me a little bit about where each of you guys are going to be working. Should we just go around so I can get a feel for whereabouts are you going to be working?
I'm going to be working at Aquaculture, and I think they're based in Freeport, but the farm is there as well.
Okay, and are you going to be on the water?
Yeah.
How about you?
I'm going to be at the Teat Band Oyster, which is Bend.
Yeah.
And I think I'm going to be on the water, so also there.
Yeah.
Wolfneck Oyster. Also.
Move to the farm.
On the water?
Yeah.
You are going to be doing the oyster part. Okay, cool.
I'll be a senior aquaculture, so land only facility
Okay.
for now.
With Tom, you're going to be on the water.
Okay.
Yeah. You're definitely going to be on the water.
Yeah.
I'm working with me. There's going to be a lot of pressure washing, so sorry about
That's
that.
fun.
Blackstone Point on the Yamascut River, so I'll be on the water.
Yeah.
Bangs Island, main family, farm co-op. Bunch.
Yeah. Land and water. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's Spartan Sea Farm.
Yeah. So you'll be working closely with these guys. Yeah. And Tom. Yeah.
I'm at non-use research.
Cool. Yeah.
And I'm at lady shuckers, so mostly ladies.
Okay. All right. So those of you on the water, I'll carry on. What-
So, imagine showing up first day, in flip-flops, shorts, cutoffs, t-shirt. That's it. What have you left behind that you might want to carry on the water to impress your employer, among other things? Okay, you haven't looked at the weather forecast. You're in your t-shirt and cutoffs, and how useful on the farm? So what? Carry on. I just
No,
trying to
this is
picture-
good. Yeah.
Get an image here.
So
What not to do.
yeah, what not to do. And literally, so this has happened. I had a lovely young lady working with me about 4 years ago who turned up one day in designer jeans, brand new Doc Martens, and a lovely denim jacket. What's wrong with that? Why is that not a good idea? It's gonna get dirty and smelly and torn and stained. Your Doc Martens will never look the same. That lovely shine, they're going to totally be gone. Another example, it's actually happened. There's a young guy from California who's come to Maine to spend a year here at UMaine. And he comes into the farm in the middle of the summer with torn off jean shorts and some nice canvas shoes and a t-shirt. What's wrong with that?
The shoes have no stability and they're not waterproof.
And they're going to slip like crazy if the floor's wet. And so if it's 90 degrees on land, is it going to be 90 degrees on the water? No, I mean, I carry a winter hat with me even on the warmest days on the water because that wind can be chilly. So with all that in mind, what are you going to wear and what are you going to take with you on your first day on the water?
Like some sort of,
Yep.
layers.
Layers, totally. That's absolutely it. Layers. And boots of some kind, and they've got it with a good grip. Waterproof is good, unless you like spending your whole day in wet socks and shoes, you know, so I'd go with waterproof. Okay, so that layers and
What else?
good boots. What else?
I don't love denim on both. Like when you said what she was designer jeans and a denim jacket, if denim gets wet, especially your
Kills.
cotton and your whole body is going to be cold and like.
Yeah, I wear jeans all the time on the boat. So you're right. You're absolutely
Maybe
right.
if you had to, you know, like something more
Yeah.
possibly over it.
Yeah. And
What else? There's some other items. Whole stock.
wall socks. Yeah. Okay. So beyond clothing, what else might you want to take with you?
Water.
Okay, water. That's moving on to the yeah.
Sunglasses.
Sunglasses is a good one. Sunscreen. A hat. Yeah. The baseball caps. Actually, we've lost a lot of those when you're on a boat. So that's just to be aware of that. Doesn't mean you can't wear them, just be aware they blow off really easily. Is there anything else you can think of?
Like a rain jacket.
Right, yeah, waterproof gear.
I like my gloves.
Having a little day pack. Nothing wrong with showing up with all of this.
Is there any other things I've missed, Chris?
Band-Aid. They don't have, you might ask, you know, is there first aid kit out on the water?
Yeah,
Hopefully your employer has, but if not. If you're working this, particularly on the oyster farms, those little oysters, when they're about this big and growing fast, they're like little razor. Yeah. Literally. So, yeah. No harm in that.
so that kind of leads us on to, so what are some good questions you might ask your employer?
We talk about gloves.
Yes. So is your employer going to supply gloves or do you need to bring some? That's a good question. Because as Chris says, those shellfish that are growing fast, are like it's like a death by 1,000 paper cuts. your hands just don't, they'll never be the same again.
So that would actually be a good question before you,
Yeah.
call your employer, email, whoever it is, and just say, hey, you know, what gear do I need to bring, and what gear do you use?
Right.
Like, well, what?
Are there any, when
I'm
you,
gonna jump in on that real
Yeah.
quick and just say, if anyone finds out that they hear that they cannot afford, I want you to call or email me and get it. We will work with you. Okay?
good to know. So when you get to the dock on your first day and you're on the boat, what do you need to know about being on that boat? What kind of things do you need to know where they are? And
We got life preservers like the fire extinguisher.
yeah, so you need to know if you, that's another question you can maybe ask your employer. You know, you're going to hope that they've got life jackets, right? But you want to probably be sure they've got one that fits you. So you need to know where the life jackets are, put them on. What else would you like to know where it is on the boat? First aid kit. Emergency equipment, you just said like the fire extinguisher, what other kind of things might there be? Flares.
What do you do if you get the first day you're on the job and they say, oh yeah, take that skip out and go clean those oyster crates. It gives you a brush and say, yeah, just dump the skip, go do it. What's your response to me? Am I qualified to run that boat? Have I been checked out in that boat? Do I feel comfortable in that boat? If you can't say yes, then you have no business going off on that boat until you feel safe. That it's not likely to happen, but the other thing is that even farther down the road, maybe it's a month in, and you're now the operator of the boat. You're now responsible for everyone on that vessel. So if you head off and you haven't checked that the life jacket, or you haven't checked the fuel, you haven't checked that all the safety gear that is legal, then if the Coast Guard or the Marine Patrol comes, you're the one that's going to get fined. You may get your employer to bail you out, but the helmsman is responsible. So if you don't feel ready for that, you just need to say so.
Yeah. So this morning when you were doing the boat handling, did you go over what types of things need to be on the boat? So what did he bring up? What did he say you need to have on the boat? Life jackets.
And knife. You know, where like the lock boxes, the lock box for all the boats. The manual, your legal and all.
We talk about other safety items required on the vessel. Like flares, those are all Coast Guard requirements. If you got these flares, this is your responsibility, but if the flares are out of date, things like.
Yeah, so let's talk through what would happen if there was a problem whilst you're at sea, right? So if there's a problem, and what's the first thing you want to do? Say the engine stopped working. You're going to want to communicate with somebody, probably, right? So how do you communicate? What are you going to use to communicate? Yeah, so now not every boat that you get on is going to have a VHF radio. But if they do, you want to know that that VHF radio is there and that it's got battery, right? And so do you know how to use a VHF radio? So if you've got a VHF radio on your boat, what channel does it need to be tuned for to hear anything from the Coast Guard? It is.
If you're guessing,
It's
the
60.
other out.
It is 60.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure.
And most radios will automatically go to 16.
And sometimes when you've got it on, you're listening to the radio and the Coast Guard will come on and say that they're going to put out a weather warning on a different channel, and that can be 22. Then you might need to change and slip. So I would want to know, if I'm getting on that boat, where are the flares? Where's the life jacket? You have to have a life jacket for each person, and you have to have a throwable cushion. You want to know what the horn is. There should be some kind of horn, either it's a horn on the helm of the boat, or it's an air horn that might be in a safety pack somewhere. You're kind of going to want to know where that is, because in an emergency, you're going to need to move quickly. You're going to fire extinguishers. Where's that? Check that out. Where's that going to be? What am I forgetting? There's something I'm forgetting.
Well, before leaving the dock, something we always want to do is, what's the weather?
Yes. Yeah. And the
Are there
tide.
thunderstorms? Yes. Nowadays, your phone, you can see thunderstorms. You have it out. This is phenomenal. But still, having checked the weather, the squalls. Is there an anchor? Hopefully, all that safety gear is there daily. You just want to check that it doesn't. People say, "Oh, I need a life jacket." You know, it's fully life jacket.
So if you are interested in having some kind of certification about boat safety, there's a free online course that's that is approved by the state of Maine, and you can find it on boatus.com, and it takes about 8 hours to work your way through it. It's all online, and that will take you through navigation, safety, what to do in an emergency, and I highly recommend doing that if you're going to be spending time on water this summer.
We can send that out to you all.
Have you done it yet, Harry?
Yeah, I'm about like 3/4 of the way through.
Yeah. It takes quite a long time, doesn't it?
Yeah, because so you have to like read, and then every question has like a 2-minute timer. So even if you know something, you can't just click through it. You have to sit and like ponder for like 2 minutes. So it's like a minimum commitment. It's like it takes a while.
So now that you're about 3/4 of the way through, what did you learn that you didn't know before?
It's just a lot of stuff that, like, there was a big part on just like bathroom protocols with like emptying the vessel, like where you can do that, how to hook up the hose. I mean, it's really in depth.
Yeah.
It's really useful. I took notes, and it's a good refresher. I think most of us have been on a boat before, but it's just like a lot of technical stuff that's good to know.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of a difference between being on a boat recreationally and being on a boat when it's commercial, because there's stuff that is, I think there's more things that can go wrong.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So there's a lot of ropes and haulers are places that can start to cause accidents. You know, people get their fingers caught in a hauler. Seems like a very simple thing, but somebody, I think it was on Collision Point, almost lost a finger in a hauler. It's really, really easy to do. So these are things you just kind of need to make sure that you're comfortable with. You will, by the end of the summer, if there's a hauler on the boat, you will know how to use it. But make sure that you get the appropriate kind of instruction on how to use it, and you're aware of the dangers that are involved, and don't be afraid to ask questions. Now, you brought up the bathroom protocols, so that brings us to this next one about relieving. What do you do? What are your expectations about going to the bathroom on the boat? It does, right? But so you've got one of the small Carolina skiffs. Is there a head on that? There is not. No. So you're probably going to have to go in a bucket. And I think every farm, every boat is supposed to have some kind of what they call marine sanitary device, and that can literally be a bucket with the words marine sanitary device on it, with a lid on it. And at the end of the day, that has to be disposed of properly. So there's a lot of people do this. So if you need to go to the bathroom, pee in a bucket, do you throw it out over the side next to the oyster farm? And why do you think you don't do that? Yeah, right. So if there's anything in the urine, same if you want to vomit, if there's a risk of norovirus and you vomit into the sea next to an oyster farm, there is the risk that those oysters are going to take on norovirus, and that happens. And that has happened, not in Maine, I don't think, but it does happen. So it's not actually it's not easy to go to the bathroom. So I would highly recommend you do it before you leave the dock. But I've known people that don't drink all day because they don't want to go and pee in a bucket. So is that a good idea? No. So these are things that you should talk through with your employer. You know, what are their expectations? And just kind of, is it going to be a bucket? You know, just or is there the opportunity to go into shore and go to the bathroom quickly and halfway through the morning? Those things just kind of check out. What else, Chris?
Keep going.
Keep going. So, listening. What things do you think you're going to need to listen to when you're on a boat? Everything the captain says, and then you're going to argue with him and go, hey, actually, why don't we do it this way? No, I mean, it might be something that you've actually got a really good idea about, but there's like read the room a little bit. So, and then and actually at sea, when there's stuff happening and he's asking you to do something, just do it. And if you've got an idea you want to share, find the appropriate time to share that idea, rather than go, well, actually, I want to do it this way. Partly because they've probably already done it your way and it didn't work. And so it's hard to know why they want to do something a particular way if you're not used to it and it doesn't make sense to you. Ask questions is totally fine. Having good ideas is totally fine. Just think about when's the right time to share that. Being a team player, why is that important? Getting the work done, but there's also a big safety aspect to it, right? So you're going to be responsible for each other's safety whilst you're on the water, and that's a big deal. So has anybody ever done a man overboard drill? Right, do you talk us through what do you do if somebody falls over the side?
Well, I was on a boat with like 30 people, so everyone had their own roles. And I was just the lookout, so I would just went to the front of the boat, make sure that any boats or rocks. But we had people who were always watching the head. We actually threw like a ball over. So we had people always watching. We had someone steering the boat. I don't really remember the other roles. There were lots of things to do.
Okay.
When you're watching, you want to be pointing.
Yeah.
So that whoever's steering the boat.
Because it's really, really easy to lose sight of somebody in waves. And yellow actually is amazingly difficult to see, even and orange, even in the sea, but when there's waves and lots of things going on. So yeah, as soon as somebody goes overboard, you shout, man overboard. So everybody on boats knows that somebody's over the side. You point at that person and you keep your eye and your finger pointing at them, but you're listening for what's happening with the rest of it. Because so there's one person that's responsible for keeping their eye on who's over the side, keeping your finger pointed at them so you never lose sight of them. And there's going to be somebody else who's responsible for steering the boat in to try and retrieve them. Ideally, you have a third person who can help them get back on the boat, or more than one. So that this is something to think about as well. And another reason why I think the online courses are helpful, because it helps you just to kind of get into the right mindset about things to think about when you're on board. Yeah.
Do you make a radio call at any point? Like you think it's too serious? Is there like a time or sort of
Yeah, so Okay, so let's think about how to make a call and what would happen if you do. Okay, so there are two types of calls that you might hear. I guess you could say there's three types, but there's, if you were going to put out some kind of emergency, there's something called PAN, which is more of an advisory saying something's happening here, but I don't need your help right now. And then the other one's Mayday. And so if you're making a call like that, you start by saying words 3 times. So if it's Mayday, it's Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Then what would you say next? So man overboard, I wouldn't actually call a Mayday unless I can't get them, I've lost them. I would be dealing with that situation first, because if you're making a call, it could be hour or more, depending on where you are, before somebody gets to help you. So you need to deal with that situation straight on. But if you've lost your engine and see it's getting really rough and you're in danger or you're starting to sink, that's when you might be making a Mayday. If you are, your engine's broken down, but you're trying to fix it, but you're adrift, that might be when you make a can. Just to let people in the area know that there's a situation, you cannot control your boat, they need to be aware that you can't control. That might be when you do something like that. But you can also use the VHF radios to talk to other fishermen in the area. And if you wanted to talk to other people, then you say their name. So for example, we've got a boat near us, it's called Ernest. So I might go, Ernest, this is farm vessel Kelpie, can we go to channel? And you switch channel, and then you talk to them on another channel. And then you say, okay, I need a help, I need a tow or something. So one of the things, when you make an emergency call, even if you're using a cell phone, if you're going to talk to the Coast Guard, you need to know you need to tell them who you are and where you are. So how are you going to get that? Well, you obviously know who you are. So you need to know the name of the boat. What's the name of the boat? Where are you? How are you going to describe where you are? Do you feel like you can do that? Yeah, so hopefully you've got some kind of system of it that can tell you that long, but you're actually just becoming aware, making yourself knowledgeable about the bay or river that you're going into and know where it is so you can describe it. So Harry's going to be working with us on Union River Bay, and we're going to be at the north end of Union River Bay near Newbury Neck. And so every time we have somebody on, I make them recite this and start to learn landmarks between the dock, and so that if something happens between the dock and the farm, you know some of those landmarks, and you can say, we've lost a man overboard near Tupper Ledge. You know, so it's really important to have that kind of situational awareness so that you can report back any kind of emergencies. But anything else?
No, but we're just checking in. We have 15 minutes.
I thought it was 40.
You can,
No,
we started late.
Yeah,
We
okay.
go a little bit longer.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, keep going. And then if we have time, I'll do a short thing on 5.
Security.
5.
Okay, great. So the next one I wanted to talk about, just know, before we go on to being a good ambassador, is there anything else you want to talk about what you need to take on the day, what you take with you on the boat? Any questions about anything? No. All right, so next section was being a good ambassador. So what do you think that means?
I feel like it means being like a good representation of the farm, whether you're on the boat or if you're in public, just kind of being like, not necessarily like a spokesperson, but having like a good image of the company, just being a good worker.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly right. So aquaculture it's kind of controversial. There are people who have very strong opinions about it. And so we are ambassadors both for our business, but also for the entire sector. And a lot of the opinions, negative opinions about aquaculture, stem from a bad interaction. So if you delve into a lot of the social science, most of there's a topic called social license to operate. It's a theoretical framework about relationships between businesses and their communities. In order to get social license to operate from somebody or from a community, it's all about trust. There's a lot of trust generating activities that a business needs to do. And I've got a news article that I'm going to hand out to you all that talk about these trust generating activities that farmers do to get SLO. So if you're approached on a dock and somebody's got like a ton of questions, like what's that here? That's not a lobster trap, and they're really interested, they're asking you questions. Are you just going to go, oh, sorry, I don't have time, and walk away? Or are you going to try and take the time to answer their questions? Hey. The answer is you're going to try and take the time to answer the questions, because you want that person to have a good interaction, and so that there's quality communication, quality interaction, that's positive impact on both the business that you're working for, but it's also for everybody that's around you. So your decisions and actions they have quite, it may not seem like much talking to one person on a dock who's asking you a question, or slowing down for that one kayak that's in the river, or waving at the neighbors who are near your farm. You know, these things are subtle but really important and impacts you, your fellow crew, the company that you work for. It impacts all these other people that are working on the water, impacts other aquaculture farms in the state. So it's just to try and raise your awareness of just how important it is your interactions with the general public are. You know, they are important. And this is that kind of concept that I just talked about, social license to operate, SLO. And you get, it's not a yes or no, it's not binary, it's not black and white. So it's a paradigm, a continuum. So you've got people who might be kind of in the middle there and they're not really decided, but these positive interactions help to improve social license that's going up in this diamond shape. And what you're really striving for is for somebody to say, hey, that's our local oyster farm. That is psychological identification. That's when they feel like this is the connection to their community. But it doesn't take much for you to get negative interactions that result in the negative, oh, that's that stupid oyster farm down the road. They're really rude. You know, this was just to try and make you really aware how important your interactions are. And you're here to be a great ambassadors for the businesses that you're working with this summer, for aquaculture, and hopefully go on to be great stewards into the future once Chris and I retire. I think, so anybody only got any questions about that? All right, and I'll leave it to you then, Chris.
All right.
All right, there we go. All right, we'll go to bigger. So most of you, many of you are going to be on oyster farms, right? Like all but 2 or 3. So I just want to talk about one aspect of growing oysters. As opposed to other shellfish, you're growing product that's going to be consumed raw. By and large, most oysters get eaten on the half shell in a raw bar, in a restaurant, at home. Because of that, there's some public health aspects, because you're consuming a raw product that hasn't been cooked. Unlike mussels and clams, scallops that generally are cooked, which can kill. The cooking would kill any bacteria that could make someone ill. So because we're eating raw, consuming raw product, the state GMRI monitors all the water quality areas that we're working out of for bacterial pollution. That meaning, is there a sewage plant nearby that's discharging raw sewage into the water? And then the oysters, they're filter feeders, right? So they take in that sewage and some of it can stay in their gut. and now you've got either a virus or a bacterium or something, or another, or a protozoan that then is being consumed, hasn't been cooked. But the state monitors all this, and if the water quality is not adequate to have safe consumption, your farm will know about it. Your farm, your crew chief is monitoring this stuff. Will be. And so if there's like a rainfall closure, if we get more than 2 inches of rain in 24 hours, generally speaking, that a water body that receives 2 inches or more of rain in 24 hours is closed, called a flood closure. And you'll get an email or get a text or something saying that. And that means you can't take product out of the water until that is lifted. But that's all managed by the state really well. Red tides are the other thing that's also really well managed by the state. And a red tide, when I talk about red tides, what we're talking about toxic, typically they can be harmful algal blooms can include the toxic dinoflagellates that cause paralytic shellfish poisoning. It's a saxitoxin, it's a neurotoxin that's carried in these dinoflagellate marine phytoplankton naturally occurring. The oyster consumes it, or a mussel or a clam consumes it, and it doesn't particularly bother the clam or the mussel, but if we eat them, and the cooking does not get rid of it, but if you consume it, you can be ingesting that neurotoxin. What it does is it attacks the nerve synapses throughout your central nervous system, and it doesn't allow one nerve to talk to another nerve. And that's not good, right? If your brain is trying to send a signal to your lungs to inhale, for your diaphragm to inhale, and that signal doesn't make it from the brain to the diaphragm, you're in big trouble. And that's what a toxic dinoflagellate, some of them can do. So anyway, that's monitored really well by the state. When we get closures, that's why we don't harvest during the closure. One of the things, though, that is not monitored by the state, is monitored, but is more difficult to control, and that's a species of bacteria called Vibrios. And let me just jump to that. Hold on. I get down to the Vibrios, and then we'll talk. Some of this stuff we're not getting into. Oh, there's Annie was talking about that. There's your basic marine sanitation.
But they put a noodle on it, which is nice and comfy.
Yeah. All right, let me get this out of here. Oh, wait a minute. These are the PSPs. We're passing this. I'm going to get to the Vibrios. Okay. So Vibrios they're naturally occurring bacteria. Typically all marine bacteria. They're classified as a rod type bacteria. And things like Vibrio cholera, we've heard cholera is a freshwater version of this that kills tens of thousands of people a year. Well, we have 2 species of Vibrio that occur in our waters throughout the United States. Vibrio parahemolyticus and vulnificus. So the 2 big ones that we worry about. Generally, it's not a problem. The problem occurs when it's what we call post-harvest process, meaning they're naturally occurring. They get ingested into the gut of an oyster, but what happens is and the levels in the gut aren't enough to really cause a problem, because your immune system can process. But what happens is if those bacteria start to multiply, then you can get to levels that can make someone quite sick. And this is what we want to talk about, and why we have to worry about that. And these are the factors that really control populations. And the salinity we don't have much control over. But the number one, temperature is the big thing. As the water gets warmer up into the 20s Celsius, that's when Vibrios like those conditions, and you're going to have more Vibrio in the water. So during the summer months, in the Gulf Coast, it's definitely during the summer months. But the problem occurs when you pull the oysters out of the water, now they're sitting on the deck of the boat, and it's a hot sunny day, it's 90 degrees out, and your crew hasn't covered or iced them. So this is when you can run into problems, because that bacteria starts to multiply inside the oyster. And it can only, in a matter of hours, that multiplying of the bacteria can get to a level that if you were to now eat that oyster, that can make you sick. But the other, they also, this is kind of not something we do before lunch, but Vibrios can also, if you get cut on the water, the naturally occurring Vibrios can get into a wound, and you really want to take wounds on some salt water seriously. If you get a cut, you want to wash it and keep it dry, because lobstermen often get Vibrio, because Vibrio is on the shell of the lobster, and when you're picking up a lobster and it gets you a little jab, that's something you take seriously. Same with oysters; they're just surface coating bacteria, and so you want to if you get a cut, you want to clean it and keep an eye on it, because things can go bad. People flesh-eating bacteria that you read about in Florida, and people step on a shell, cut their foot, and they get this flesh-eating. It's a Vibrio, and it can be very serious. Yeah.
You use like hand sanitizer for that?
So, my guess.
That's what we get
Yeah,
down.
a little alcohol. Yeah. This is just kind of to drive in the point that it can be serious and it can be deadly. Septicemia is nothing to shake a fist at. Most people that get Vibrio poisoning, though, it's gastroenteritis, and they just have a stomachache or they throw up, and then it usually resolves itself. So the way we control this is, if you look at this plot, time and temperature. This is the time that in hours that it takes to have a doubling of the number of of bacteria. And it's pretty clear when you get above 80 degrees, in 5 hours, you can actually get to levels that can become pathogenic. And so because of that, what we do on the farm is when you're pulling out of the water, you have to go on to ice within 2 hours. Okay? And unless you're resubmerging. So if you're harvesting, we're either icing down or we're getting it into a cooler within a couple of hours, because otherwise on a hot day, and what happens is, if there is an outbreak and someone gets sick, and the oysters that you harvested go to a restaurant in Maryland, and someone eats those oysters, gets sick, goes to the hospital, your farm will be putting shellfish tags. It's for traceability on every bag of oysters. The tag has the date, the location it was harvested from, the species, the grade, has the name and address of your farm, the registration number of your farm. That goes with those oysters all the way to the end user. And so if someone gets sick, there's a way to trace back. And that's what the FDA does, is they trace back to find the source of whatever made someone sick. Well, if there are 2 or more outbreaks of Vibrio in a water body, within a single growing area, there's an automatic closure of that area. So in the Damariscotta River, if we had 2 outbreaks of Vibrio and someone got sick, they would shut down the entire Damariscotta River, all 10 farms, until October 1. As a measure. So if someone gets sick because someone didn't handle the oysters well in June, and a couple of people get sick, that whole river, all those farms, 100 people would be out of work. And so that's why we're really concerned about following the rules carefully in terms of handling product post harvest handling. It's so good. So that is kind of and so what the farms have are Vibrio control plans. We have it in the Damariscotta, the Sheepscot, New Meadows, a few places where we're required to develop a plan that the farm has to stand by. And it's all about time and temperature. getting product cooled down quickly. The other, eventually this is going to be statewide, but right now these are the areas shown where there are control plants that all the farms have to run. So many of you this might apply to. So yeah, so it's all about shading and cooling, and then it's not a problem. And then you have a nice product. And I think that was my take home message. Time and temperature and chilling, and that's, you might have an exactly full of ice out on the water that you can be chilling so that it stays safe. And Vibrio season opens up. It's June 1st is when you start having to implement it. During the winter months or the fall and spring, it's not warm. It's not so hot that but certainly. Okay, I'm going to stop there and stop person.
Does anybody have any questions for Annie or Chris? No? Awesome. Well, thank you both for presentation.
Yeah. Have fun, you guys.
Yeah.
You're going to have a good summer.
So next up we have Carissa. Carissa works at GMRI, which is a Gulf of Maine Research Institute. So Chris is going to talk to us a little bit today about environmental stewardship. But if you want to start out with giving just, a brief introduction about yourself, I know we'll talk to you a little bit more later, but you can start out the conversation that way. Cool. Sounds good.
All right. Hi, everybody. I don't have a presentation, so you just stop looking at me. So sorry about that. So my name is Carissa Morin. I work at the Gulf of Maine Research Institute. I'm in their community department and I work in aquaculture. So I'm originally from Long Island, New York. I moved up here seven years ago. So quite a while. And I originally came up here because I was working on an aquaculture farm out in Montauk, Long Island, which is like the tip of Long Island, New York, and was going to conferences and was like, every conference I went to, Maine was like the topic of conversation. So I wanted to continue my career and wound up going to University of New England, get my master's in marine ecology, working at Bang on Mussels, did my research there, and now I worked as an adjunct for there for a little bit. And now I'm at GMRI. So yeah, GMRI is a really unique place to work at, and I couldn't be happier to be involved in it. So we specifically try to find solutions to complex ocean challenges. So we have 3 different departments. So we have our education department, which if you're living in Maine, you may have been familiar with our lab venture program. So we bring 6th graders from across the state to our facility at GMRI. We pay for the busing, it's all free. And they go and learn about lobstering and climate change and invasive species. So basically the black sea bass that are moving up in here. And they do a really cool investigative they do their own data sorting. They learn how to visualize data. They'll make graphs. They'll sort like fake stomach contents of the fish and trying to see what they're eating. I think we do 10,000 kids a year we reach. So it's really an amazing program, and it kind of gets people from, as far as Rooster County down and understanding what's happening in our oceans and our coastal waterways. So the other part that we have is our research department. So we have some really great researchers, scientists, PhDs that are doing water tracking, monitoring, checking out phytoplankton communities and tracking where they're going. We have our heat temperature mapping. So we're actually tracking the temperature of the water and tracking how, as most of you have heard, probably Gulf of Maine warming faster than 90% of the global waterways. We also do a lot of work with fishermen. So I'm in the community department. So what we do is we actually interact with the industry and the community. So we have our sustainable seafood group that works directly with fishermen and getting their product into more channels. So basically we have an agreement with Hannaford's. We're getting local seafood into Hannaford's, making sure they file their sustainability. We have a responsibly harvested program, which basically identifies sustainably harvested seafood and identifies how they're being harvested and what rules are being followed. We also have an MREP program, which is Marine Resource Education Program, where we bring fishermen, regulators, and scientists all into the same room and have conversations, which you can imagine is not easy to do.
But the whole point of that program is to empower fishermen to be involved in the regulatory processes that are happening. A lot of times fishermen feel like they're not heard, but it's because they don't know how to speak up. And so this program actually trains them to become involved and have a voice and be able to have those conversations and be on boards and communicate with regulators and scientists to make sure that everyone's kind of working together. We also have our climate center. So we're working, it's new, so we haven't had any like amazing projects that have come out of that yet, but we're working on it. And then me and my aquaculture program. So again, I work directly with industry. All of the projects that I work on came from industry. They were ideas that came to me and said, like, we really need this. One of them was the creation of the Maine Aquaculturist. So this is a free online knowledge portal that anybody can use, and it has a start guide of how to start your own farm. It has over 250 resources in our resource database that are filterable. It has a job board. It has legislative updates on there as well. And it also has an industry perspectives page, which basically, once you collect all this data, you kind of notice where there's gaps. And so I would go directly to industry members who are experts on these gaps and have them write a one-pager, basically explaining it in their point of view. So it's really easy to digest, and so helping to fill those gaps. Yeah, so that's a little bit about GMRI. Yeah, so basically what we're trying to do is make sure that we're being good stewards to the environment as aquaculturists. As you've probably heard, aquaculture is under a lot of scrutiny from everybody. And so with those extra eyes on it, we always want to make sure we're doing the right thing. So climate change is something that's happening. It's not going away, it's only going to get worse, but we can do things to help mitigate it. So specific things that climate change is affecting within the aquaculture community is ocean acidification. Has everyone heard of ocean acidification? Awesome. So you guys know the basic thing. So this is affecting our shellfish communities basically by making their shells softer and they're more susceptible to breakage, which one in the wild is bad because then they're getting eaten up by these horrible green crabs, which is just atrocious. But then in the shellfish community, when you're harvesting a lot of shellfish, sometimes you can't really be that gentle with them. So the thinner the shells are, the more easily they'll be susceptible to cracking and breaking, and then you're losing more of your product to that breakage because of those low carbon in the water numbers. So ways to mitigate that. People have been growing kelp nearby to oyster farms and mussel farms, and that creates kind of like a halo effect, very localized effect. So again, kelp is not the silver bullet that is going to save the world and stop climate change from happening. I wish it was, believe me, but there are things that it does well. And one of those things is that ocean acidification, localized effect, that halo effect. So that's a really great thing. And then you have another source, so you're also diversifying your stock. So therefore, there you're getting more income, which is really great. In our hatchery, so specifically the oyster hatchery, we don't really have a full booming hatchery for mussels. We have one mussel hatchery at Down East Institute. But with the oysters, people are actually buffering the waters at that hatchery stage. So basically the water has gotten so acidic that it's affecting these juvenile larval growth. And so in order to produce the best quality, we're already having to buffer the water. So this is something that's not going to go away. We're already having to do it, and it's only going to get worse. So it's something to be aware of. When it comes to power usage, so a lot of things that you have to be careful of when you're writing your lease. You have to say how you're going to mitigate sound, how you're going to mitigate smells, all that kind of stuff. So when you're using a tumbler on a barge or something like that, you're going to probably have to run a generator because you need electricity, right? So one of the ways that some farms are mitigating this and solving two birds with one stone, they're using solar power. So they're having these solar panels that are actually powering their tumblers and powering their equipment. So one, you're negating that sound that people have been complaining about. And two, those solar panels, you can actually use as shade. So as Chris talked about, shade is a really important thing when you're harvesting. So you're one, using less, you're producing less emissions, and two, you're protecting your lovely neighbors from the sound of the generators, which, some people really have a problem with that. And I don't know why it's a working waterfront, but it is what it is. Let's see, what else do we got? Yeah, so with warming waters comes more bacteria, as Chris talked about. So we're having more of these closures, we're having higher rainfall events. So whenever there's a rainfall event of, I think it's an inch or the 2 inches within 24 hours, it shuts down. So basically it's just like an automatic closure. So with climate change is coming more extreme weather, which is coming with more closures. So being aware of where you site your farm is very important, because if you're in one of these areas that has frequent closures, it's going to be happening more and more with these high rainfall events. Additionally, with biotoxins, this is something that's like out of our control, unfortunately, because we can't control the phytoplankton populations out there. But it is happening more and more on a more frequent basis. We're getting new species coming into the area and causing these biotoxin closures, which is difficult to deal with. But one of the ways to prevent this is if you see something, say something. So if you're on the water and you kind of notice the water's looking a little different color today, or something's not exactly right, make sure that you express that to your crew chief or whoever you're working with, so they can kind of keep an eye on that and monitor it. Because unfortunately, the best thing for that is prevention. And so what a lot of farmers will do, if they know that a high rainfall event is coming, they'll harvest a lot of their oysters right before the rainfall event. So that way, if they are shut down for, say, a week or 2 weeks, that they have all this product harvested already, that will help mitigate the loss of not being able to harvest for that amount of time. There's been issues in Casco Bay recently where there was a mussel farm that couldn't harvest for like a month or 2 months because of biotoxin. And so in order to prevent, it's happening more and more, and it's really unfortunate. So the only ways we can do that is to mitigate it. There are people that are working on like an eDNA test. So on the water test, you can just like plop this little thing in the water and take a sample, and it'll tell you what's going on with the biotoxins, if it's active or not. But that's still in the making. They're doing a lot of that work at Bigelow. So Bigelow Labs is doing a lot of the biotoxins work. They're working with the state to do this, and that's all new and inventive stuff. And they're actually trying to understand what's going on with the phytoplankton, because it's really amazing that there will actually be this phytoplankton in the water and at high numbers, but they're not producing the biotoxin. And they still don't know what causes them to snap and start producing that biotoxin. So the more that we can understand the physiology of these phytoplankton, the more we can understand what causes these toxins to be released, and then be able to mitigate them and harvest before they happen. So that's a lot of stuff that's going on. Shellfish is really amazing. They take up carbon, so they're a carbon sink. They're also a nitrogen sink, so they take a lot of those and sequester it into their shells. So they're really amazing, and they filter everything out of the water. So they're pretty impressive, but again, you want to be careful because they are harvesting everything out of the water. So if you're in an area that is high risk to any type of pollution, that's going to be a problem. And a lot of people claim aquaculture is not good for the environment, but to me, it doesn't make sense, because in order to have a healthy, clean product, you need healthy, clean water. So that's the number one thing that you're trying to do, is make sure that you're in an area that is pristine, and you want to keep it pristine. And I think that's the number one thing to get across to people when they talk about aquaculture, is that you want to, aquaculturists don't do well if the environment's not doing well. It's a very symbiotic relationship there. Let's see. Yeah, so I think that's, what time is it?
Chris, can you talk a little bit about the work that you did on the aquaculture standard, occupational
Oh,
standard?
yeah, so
Sebastian briefly mentioned it yesterday, but I can talk a little bit about that, and a little bit about the apprenticeship program that just launched. I think that will help move into some stuff we're gonna do.
yeah, can do. All right, so we hired a Scottish consulting firm, and they came, they have a very established aquaculture industry in Scotland. They came over here and they interviewed I think over 60 aquaculturists and close to 50 educational institutions. And what they were trying to do was find out what programs are happening currently in aquaculture in the state of Maine, and what the industry is looking for when they're hiring someone. So we compared the skills, the core skills that the farms were looking for, and what the skills were being provided at the educational institutions. And at the time, there was a very big mismatch with that. So a lot of people were coming out of school with like a 4-year degree or a master's degree, and never actually having stepped on a farm. It's very common. And so they didn't know the basic nautical skills, they didn't have an understanding of the equipment that was being used. And they were also coming out of these schools and expecting to be like a manager of a farm. And so there was a misalignment that was going on that we identified. The farms are looking for people that were hardworking, good at problem solving, has basic trade skills, so like electric, plumbing, construction, those type of skills, and basically someone that understood basic husbandry. They're not saying they want you to be able to run a farm by yourself, but basically understand why you flip cages, why you're doing the things you do. So we work together with Educate Maine and Maine Aquaculture Association, and we interviewed, I think it was 32 farms, and we created this, well, MAA did, this big list of occupational standards. So this is the first time that this has really been done. There are people that are now trying to copy this. So we did it for shellfish and seaweed, shellfish hatcheries, finfish, marine-based finfish, and then land-based RES finfish. And we walked through the skills, the knowledge, the duties, and the what was the other one? Skills, knowledge, duties. Oh, I can't remember the third one. It was basically, we created a list of all these things that the farms are looking for. So if you're going to start from the bottom, we start from the bottom as like a farm hand. These are all the skills that they're looking for. These are all the knowledge that you're expected to have. And these are all the duties you're going to be expected to perform. And we listed all of those out. We did it for farm hand, for crew chief, and for farm manager. So these were really great because now we have this unified document that can be used for any type of educational setting. So these were created mostly for the educators, not really for the farms. It was helpful for the farms because they were actually able to put down on paper what they're doing every single day. Because even when I have farmers write a job description, they're like, I don't know what to put in this. And now they go to the occupational standards and they're like, yep. Okay, here you go. Easy as pie. So there's easier for them to articulate what you're doing on a farm. But again, like I said, these are created for educators. So now places like University of Maine, University of New England, Washington County Community College, Southern Maine Community College, they're all looking at these standards and incorporating what the farms actually want into their curriculum. So now we're having a more, I know, right? Mind blowing. So now we're having a more skilled workforce coming out of these programs, which is really amazing. Additionally, on top of that, we did see kind of a gap. So 2-year schools, 4-year schools, they're all really great. And believe me, I have a master's. I've gone back and forth. I didn't have a linear path, which I'll talk about later, but I've gone back and forth between industry and school. But what we noticed is that there was a gap in this kind of vocational training. So college isn't for everyone. Not everyone wants to sit at a desk and watch PowerPoints and study and do all these really, sometimes can be mind-numbing activities. But so we realized this and we worked with the Department of Labor and we actually created the first in the nation shellfish and seaweed aquaculture apprenticeship program. So this is a program that's based off work experience. So you actually go into the farm, you do 2,000 hours of on-the-job training. We have a schedule of work that we created based off the occupational standards. So again, it all ties back. And then we also, you have to do 144 hours of like, I think they call it RTI, which is basically a classroom time. So we partnered with Southern Maine Community College to offer these courses for free. So we just launched our boot camp in April. So that was a 40-hour week. And the students came, we had 5 apprentices join, as well as 5 people that were not involved in the program. So this program is open up to anybody to take it. And they learned things like how to tie knots. They actually drove a skiff. So they operated a skiff. They worked on docking a skiff, which is a little scary sometimes. We had a little dings on our skiff, but it wasn't bad. They went to DMR and they talked to Cole about shellfish sanitation and Vibrio. They all took the Vibrio quiz, which if you have time, I highly recommend it. You watch like a quick video and it's like a 10 question quiz. And it just highlights all those interesting facts about it. It makes your employer feel a little bit better about you guys having that knowledge. They learned how to read charts. They took apart a motor and learned how to do oil changes. They learned how to change spark plugs. We talked to people in the industry, so they actually spoke with farmers and learned about that. They learned about the different types of gear. They learned about water quality monitoring, which was actually requested by the farms themselves. They were like, can we have people that understand how to use the equipment that monitors water? Because that's not a skill that everyone has. Not everyone has access to a YSI. Like it's not easily accessible, but they were looking for someone that understood how to do that. So this again was all, we had a couple PowerPoints, but it was mostly hands-on, moving around and actually doing things. People that are involved are people that, one of our apprentices works in construction and landscaping his whole life, never set foot on the water. His farm contacted me the other day and said that he's absolutely amazing, that he's doing great. He's excelling at everything they ask him to do. We had another person that was a writer. We had people that were in 4-year degrees that just wanted more hands-on experience. We had a commercial fisherman from California drive cross country, and now he is at a mussel farm in Islesboro, loving life. So it's that kind of accessibility is what that program is supposed to be giving. So sometimes when you see a 4-year degree or 2-year degree, it can be scary to people, and it is a lot of work. And again, now they're getting all this experience while getting paid. So they're hired as an employee. So they're getting paid. We have built-in pay raises as they learn these skills. They're getting a well-rounded experience because they're not going to be sitting there sorting oysters for 5 months out of the year. They have expected to do all the things that are on the scheduled work to get a well-rounded experience. With the farm, they're benefiting because this person's there for a full year. So they're not having to retrain somebody who's there for the summer. Every summer they have to go through seasonal workers, which seasonal workers are very important and key to the industry. But sometimes it's good to have someone you can rely on that has that knowledge, who can share that knowledge to other people. All you have to join the apprenticeship is a high school diploma or the equivalent, 18 years old. So it's a low bar for entry point, and that's all you have to have. And so it's a really great program, and I'm really excited to see how it goes. So it's been going quite well. So yeah. Anything else I could touch on? Did I miss anything?
What are some of the farms that have apprentices, at least this year, and do you have plans to expand that?
Yeah. So we have 5 farms that are involved right now. So Mere Point Oyster, which is in Brunswick, has 2 actually. They have 2 apprentices. We have Maine Ocean Farms, which is in Freeport. They have an apprentice. We have Islesboro Marine and Marshall Coles Mussels. So Shay and Josh Conover, they have the fishermen. That's 3. Ferta Farms. So Ferta Farms has 1, and they actually are one of the farms that are using solar power to operate their equipment. So Max Burtis, who runs that farm, is very ingenuitive. Huh?
He's gonna be here later.
Oh, awesome. Cool. Yeah, he's a great guy to talk to and get to meet. And then the last one is Muscongas Bay. Yeah, thank you. Muscongas Bay. So Muscongas Bay, they also have a partnership with Dodge Code too. So it's like a couple, they do a hatchery and grow out. So they're one of the hatcheries in the state. The 2 main ones are Muscongas Bay and Mook. So those are the 2 main ones. There's a few other ones that are kind of popping up, but they're not as well versed as those 2. So yeah, so those are the 5. And we do plan to expand next year. So we have funding through the USDA to provide stipends for the farms. So the farms get $5,000 for participating in this, since it is a pilot and we want to make sure that it's successful. The apprentices also get a $3,000 stipend, and this is to help them during the classroom time. They technically don't get paid because they're not working on the farm. So that is to help alleviate that kind of stressor. Additionally, they get half up front. So if for some reason someone did have to move or pay rent or something, that is also to try to help them with that. Unfortunately, I can't solve the housing crisis. I wish I could, because I've been looking for a house for how long. So, but it's hopefully to try to help in some way, shape, or form. So we have funding for 6 farms and for 6 apprentices. So this year we'll probably be looking to, if the farms that are involved want to continue, that's great. But we also would like to expand it to other farms that are doing it as well. Yeah, so 6 new apprentices will start next year. So I think this year we opened up applications in January. So those applications should be open in January, and yes. Anything else?
Do you have any questions
Yeah.
about apprenticeship, about some of the other work that GMRI does?
Go for it.
Yeah, with the apprenticeship.
Yeah.
You mentioned that some people are hatchery, so is it like dependent on the farm, like what they are looking for? So
Yeah.
you do both the hatchery and, I guess, on the farm.
Yeah, so like I said, we're working with Muscogee Bay. Our apprentice, he's not working 100% in the hatchery. He's mostly in the field, but will probably take on some hatchery responsibilities when that does ramp up. Muscogee was looking for an apprentice to do hatchery stuff, and unfortunately, they had offered it to 2 people, and it just didn't work out timing wise. So we wound up having to move on, and that's why Airpoint has 2 individuals working for them. But yeah, it's up to the farm kind of and what they're looking for. So if we do work with Mook next year, it'd be the same thing, whether they're looking for someone in hatchery or on the field or both. So sometimes people do go back and forth between that time of year because the hatcheries kind of have a slow point. And the same thing with field season. So like hatcheries kind of ramp up when field season is starting to go down. You do a lot of hatchery work in the winter, fall, winter. So that way you're prepared to have the seed to give to people in the spring when they're looking to pick them out.
Similar to the internship, positions that you guys all have, they're all very similar and have a lot of overlap, but every farm is a little bit different. The same is true of the apprenticeship and like how we wrote the occupational standards, right? Like as a standard of the occupation of a farmhand, right? But there's nuances at every farm that are going to be a little different, but the industry agreed that this was the baseline. And so one of the things that's really great about these positions that you guys are in, as well as the apprenticeship position, are that the industry agrees that the work that you are doing and the farms that are involved are like, we recognize that the work that you all are doing is interchangeable at our farms. There are nuances that you're learning that you may or may not need on another farm, but the work collectively that you are doing is transferable. And that's really what some of the work that Marissa and I and Chris and Annie and Hannah and others are all doing is to get more farmers talking about workforce development so that folks like you who are coming up aren't feeling like you had like a one and done experience and you have to start over somewhere else, that the farms and you can feel and see where that overlap is. And that it is part of a path. Many branches on the path, but there is a path.
And that's not, we're working on a badging system with the community college system. So those 144 hours that are done at SMCC will have some sort of credit in the community college system. So if you did want to go on and pursue a certificate course or a 2-year degree, that you'll have some credit towards that. And I think that's what was really, really awesome about Maine is that we all work together and we all identify like where people are succeeding and excelling in. And we said, oh, you're doing that, great. Like Washington County Community College is doing a great 2-year program and a certificate course. For me being here in Southern Maine, I was like, we don't want to reproduce that, recreate that, but we want to help feed into that program. And so that's where that 144 hours at SMCC came into play, and then having some credit go into it. Because I think we don't want to be duplicative. I don't want to recreate the wheel. If someone's doing it and they're doing it well, I just want to add to it, create some extra value. Yeah.
Is this something that you all tend to?
Probably. No, it's not a dumb question. Probably not, unfortunately, because it is hours based. So what we require from our farms in order for them to participate is to be able to host an apprentice for 9 months out of a 12-month year. And that's because during the winter time, there are some farms that do shut down, so they'll have seasonal closures. But that person is expected to work 40 hours a week up until from May, April. Actually, they all start in April. So like April till like November-ish. And so that would mess up with the typical college curriculum course. I'm familiar with it, but if there's someone that is only taking a class like once a week or something like that, I'm sure a farm would be acceptable for them to, rotate their hours around that one class. As long as you're a good hard worker, farms will work with you.
And to clarify, folks that, you know, may have already gone through a four-year degree and graduated,
Mhm.
they could still do the apprenticeship.
Oh, yeah,
program
we have
after
a few of them.
graduation.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have a few people that have a four-year degree, that have just wanted to get more hands-on or change. So we have one girl, she worked at Alaska at a salmon farm. And now she's like, I want to learn about shellfish and come back to Maine. She's from Maine. She moved away and now she's coming back. So again, a few of them have four-year degrees. Some of them don't. And that's what's great about the program. Anybody and anybody can join, which is amazing.
We're gonna do a quick transition. You can probably stay and talk about this also. Because a little bit, couple minutes before lunch, we're gonna introduce the idea of the apprenticeship.
Yeah, so,
Cool.
yeah, we can touch on this later this afternoon too. But something that we've been working with Maine Aquaculture Association, with Carissa and Sebastian, and some other folks on, is to certify the Aquaculture Pioneers program as a pre-apprenticeship. Pre-apprenticeships, just like apprenticeships, are state recognized and certified by the Maine Department of Labor. Your participation in a pre-apprenticeship program gives you certain advantages if and when you decide to go on and pursue apprenticeship with Maine Aquaculture Association in the future. So for example, going through Aquaculture Pioneers and opting in as a pre-apprentice, it doesn't require any additional work or requirements on your part. There's nothing extra that you would need to do during the summer. You would just, you know, opt in with us as a pre-apprentice and have that title of pre-apprentice. And then if you go through the summer, go through your regular work schedule, attend all of the Aquaculture Pioneers events as expected anyway, then you have the opportunity to receive credit or to put some of credit, to use some of the experiences that you gained this summer and get them as credit towards an apprenticeship program in the future. It doesn't matter, you know, what farm you're working for this summer or what farm you might again pursue as an apprentice, as Kate mentioned. All of the skills and all of the positions and all of these farms are pretty transferable. So yeah, going through Aquaculture Pioneers as a pre-apprentice doesn't mean you have to become an apprentice later on. It just opens the door even further. So as a pre-apprentice going into an apprenticeship program, you receive certain advantages such as a guaranteed interview for one of the apprenticeship positions at a farm or two of your choosing. Doesn't mean you get the job automatically, but you're at least guaranteed that initial interview. Another advantage is, as Carissa mentioned, for apprenticeships, it's 2,000 hours of on-the-job learning. Your Aquaculture Pioneers positions this summer are upwards of 480 hours. So what we have done is we've partnered with Maine Aquaculture Association to be able to award you credit for up to, I think it's up to 360 hours towards those 2,000 hours in your apprenticeship, which means if you become an apprentice in the future, that's up to 360 hours that you have already done and you can receive credit for, so you don't have to repeat. So that would put you as a leg up against some of the other apprentices, and that may impact, you might be able to start out a little bit higher on that progressive wage scale because you have these related previous experiences. So we can talk about a little bit later this afternoon what it would look like if you want to opt in. Again, there's nothing added expected of you, just the title of pre-apprentice, and it makes that transition into apprenticeship in the future much easier if that's something you decide to go on. So if there are any questions you all have about that process right away, you can let us know, but that's just something that you can consider over the next couple of days. And if that's something you're interested in and opting in as a pre-apprentice, you can work with Kate and I. It's very simple to do, but we can get you that. So that opens up that opportunity for you in the future.
And it doesn't have to be like next year either. Like, so this pre-apprenticeship like stays on your record. So if you're attending a four-year school or if you're still in high school and you need to worry about that first before you can move on to an actual job, because that's the apprenticeship is an actual job, 40 hours a week job. So that will, the pre-apprenticeship approval will stay with you until you finish that. So that way you don't have to worry about, well, I'm still in year 2 of my 4-year program. how am I gonna be able to do this? You don't have to worry about it right there, and you can wait until you graduate. So that's another benefit as well.
And I mean, we're not trying to oversell it. But you know, like the list that Carissa gave me, we don't even know what parts will be part of the apprenticeship program, you know, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, things like that. That, you know, give you opportunity to get in the door. I don't think Carissa mentioned this, but she has funding for 6 positions this year. How many applicants? So we had to turn people away.
I had 28 applicants for 6 positions, right? It was
So
very
being
difficult.
a leg up and being like, I'm coming in with skills already,
Yeah.
great, right? But
Yeah.
also number of farmers that apply for it, because they know that pretty much anyone walking onto the farm, just like that, needs to get trained, right? There are very few people that are walking onto the farm who can just walk on and do the job already, right? And there's not enough of them anyway. So going through a program like this ensures that everybody involved in the farm and the students, everybody knows that they're being trained while they're working, right? Like mindset shift, right? Like everybody knows that you're learning on the job. And so people are really excited about the idea of this apprenticeship because they know that they're bringing in someone that isn't like fully skilled as a farmhand, but that's okay because by the end of the year, you're gonna be fully skilled as at that rate. So like it helps them like know exactly what's happening. So I can only imagine that there'll be even more farms applying in the future, and we're gonna keep working together to try to find more funding to keep the program going.
Yeah.
Is it something that snowballs, like do you get 360 hours towards the 2000 every year that you do this program, or is it like a one-time, like 360 towards the 2000?
It's a good question, and I do not have an answer for
Yeah,
you, but I will
good
bring
one.
that up to the
We
DOL.
will work with the DOL and
Yeah.
find out.
It's a good question. Thank you.
Solid.
Yeah.
But to clarify, apprenticeship is to get you fully trained, fully confident in the role of a farmhand or other. And it's meant to be a doorway and an entryway into a position that also at the same time provides you opportunities for growth.
Yeah.
So the idea is not that you're going to be trained as a farmhand and you know that's what you'll be. It's expected after you're fully trained that there will be opportunities for you to grow and improve.
Yeah.
From that point going forward.
Definitely, good point, Hannah. Yeah, so like I said, we have pay increases built into the apprenticeship program as you learn skills, and the whole point is that these farms are investing extra time and energy into these apprentices. Like I said, they're not going to just be sorting oysters for the entire 3 months of the summer. They're going to be learning navigable skills. They're going to be learning how to drive the boat. They're going to be learning about food and food safety. They're going to be so there's a whole long list, but it's a very well-rounded position because what we're planning to do is to then create a crew chief. So like when you start off in an apprenticeship, you have like the basic apprentice and then you go to be like a journeyman. And so there's all those different steps. It's like typical in like construction, plumbing, electricity, so on and so forth. And so we're hoping to mock that. And so by being an apprentice and getting that well-rounded position, you're already set up to now join into that crew chief apprenticeship and be able to be elevated ahead of people that have started because you'll have that full well-rounded experience that they're looking for someone to manage a farm or manage a crew. So that's the whole point, is to create opportunities as you go along. And this is a really great time because the farms are actually growing to a point where they can do that. This was 7 years ago. It wouldn't be time yet. You know, the industry is growing, which is amazing, but it's a lot of mom and pop operations. So it's a lot of, you know, it's me and my brother, or a dad and a son, or there's a lot of those. And it's like key family members that are participating in it. And now those farms are growing to the point where they're looking to hire people. Eventually, at first, they're only going to be doing seasonal because that's all they can afford. Because it's hard to be able to provide salary and benefits to people. And that's something that the farms we're with are key to providing, is making sure that, like I said, 9 months out of the year, they have to have someone on that farm that's an apprentice, and they're providing salary, they're providing benefits. And that's an important thing that we wanted to make sure that the industry was ready for before we just threw it at them and said, hey, guess what? here's a person on your farm for 9 months out of the year, make it work somehow. And we don't want them to go bankrupt or broke trying to take on new individuals, but it's a really great timing because we're at this key point where the farms are growing enough to be able to handle this. And we're now providing them this really awesome trained workforce that's going to help them grow even more. Exciting. Any other final questions for me or GMRI or? No? Awesome. I'll be around.
Thank you, Krista. So, putting here. Gonna make that. I'm sorry, nothing personal, I promise. All right. Krista, so my name is Krista Morin. I told you guys earlier, Gulf Maine Research Institute. I've been at Gulf Maine Research Institute for 3.5 years now. Prior to that, I was at University of New England. I was their laboratory coordinator and adjunct professor for the marine sciences. And I got my master's there, working with Bangs Island mussels, looking at the invertebrate population, the fouling invertebrate populations on their farms. Before that, I'm from Long Island, New York originally, so I went to Monmouth University for my undergrad, which is actually New Jersey. And then I worked on an aquaculture farm out in East Hampton, Montauk area for 2-3 years. Right there, it was a really unique experience, and I'm really glad to have had it because it actually was a municipal run farm. So it was created by the town of East Hampton to spawn and breed and grow to about 1 year, 2 years. So not like the market size, but seed size, oysters, quahogs, and bay scallops. And the primary goal of ours was to reseed town waters with these shellfish so that way they could grow up and have something for the baymen to then harvest. So it was a conservation method that the town put in place to try to protect the baymen's heritage. So it was a really unique experience. So we had a land-based hatchery. So we would have broodstock. We collect broodstock for the clams, the oysters, and scallops. We spawn them out, and then we grew them in this upwelling system for a while. And then we would move them to our nursery, which was a recirculating, or not recirculating, it was live fed through each day. And that would be a downwelling situation. Then we moved them out to the barge in the middle of the bay. So it was really cool to see 3 different life cycles for growing up. And little shellfish babies. I'm really attached to them.
You ever sea squirt?
Eat a sea squirt?
Yeah.
I did not. I ate a grass shrimp once. This was our bathing thing.
Okay, you ever eat a sea squirt?
I have not. I have tried the tunica.
Gotcha. I just ate a sea squirt, first sea squirt last week.
If you like it.
Salty.
What prompted that?
I guess another oyster farmer ate one. And then he told my apprentice that he could eat them, and he ate one. And then he had me eat one. Now you know. Yeah, so maybe we can eat some of these fouling invertebrates.
Maybe.
Who knows? Who knows? Anyway, I'm Max Burtis. I'm co-owner of Berta Farms. We are a small family-run, one-operated oyster farm on the New Meadows River. We've been in business since 2018. And yeah, we had a aquaculture pioneers intern last year. We got to hear speak, I think, yesterday, Noah, and he's with us again this year. But yeah, my background, I dug clams for 8 years. I still dig clams. But I started this oyster farm. Some of my clam digging buddies, hopefully my dad as well, about 4 years ago. And the reason we started this farm was because we weren't really too sure where the planning was going to be in the future. And we're still not really sure, but it's a little bit safer of a bet for us to, invest some of our time and energy into the farming, as well as the commercial fishery. So right now, these days, I'm doing a lot more farming than fishing, but I do enjoy both.
And Max, for their contact, when did you graduate with your degree?
I graduated about a year ago. I graduated from University of Maine. That was mechanical engineering. And so when I was in school, both high school and college, I would do a lot of weekends, either clamming or oyster farming, and of course the summers as well. So yeah, not really using my degree a whole lot right now, but I think I looked at some of the other questions, so probably talk more about that later.
Very cool. You guys already answered my second question, so you're on top of things. Could you talk to us a little bit more about when and why you decided to pursue a career in aquaculture? Like what was it that was most interesting or exciting to you that prompted that career switch?
It wasn't really a conscious career switch for me. It became a career switch after a certain number of years. But when we began our farm, we didn't really expect it to be a commercial venture. It was almost a hobby. Instead of going to play golf on Saturday, we came down to the river, messed around in boats, trying to figure out how we could grow shellfish. We put a little business plan together, and we thought that if we could sell the oysters for 25 cents a piece, we'd be doing pretty well. And when we first got oysters ready to go to market, we were getting closer to 50 cents a piece, twice as much as we expected. Well, that's pretty good. Maybe we should grow a few more next year. And so we did, and we expanded. We started with a very small lease. We started with a standard lease because there were no LGAs. But we started with a fairly small lease, and we've expanded it over the years. So now we operate on about 20 acres in the Ambassador River. So we all had other activities, and we still do to some extent. Chris runs the Aquaculture Innovation Center. As I say, Carter also runs the mussel farm. Carter and I play music, so we do a lot of that in the summer, also throughout the year. I used to do more music, and I've kind of turned to the oyster farming as more of my career these days than the music playing. I also work as a folklorist, so I work over the years with documentary music and folklore of Canada. But as the business grew, it became more of a business. We got a little more serious about it, and I became the one who kind of operated the nursery and the sales part of the operation.
Yeah, so I always loved the ocean. That was always a big passion of mine. And I went to school in Monmouth University, and I kind of floundered a little bit once I graduated. Didn't really know what I wanted to do. I had this degree in marine conservation, marine biology, and I was so interested in so many different aspects of marine biology that I was really struggling to pick where to go for a master's, because when you do your master's, it's very specific to the project you're working on. And I just didn't feel like I was at the maturity level, and I guess just not ready to pick a focus, and I wanted to kind of have more life experiences. So I wound up not even going back to school for a couple of years, and I wound up working at retail for a while and just re-questioning my whole life perspective. I was like, did I choose the wrong career? Did I choose the wrong path? And then one day my neighbor brought home the Montauk paper from Montauk, and there was a job opening for working on their aquaculture farm. And I was like, you know what? It's 2 hours from my house, but this is something I want to try, and I'll try it, see what happens, and see if I like it. I went to the interview treating it as a typical interview. So I showed up in dress pants and nice blouse, and my hoop earrings, which one of my coworkers now says is my staple. I love my hoop earrings, but she thought we weren't gonna get along because of how big my food earrings were. So I showed up to this boat launch dressed like that. And thankfully, my boss Barley just didn't even judge me at all and just threw me on the boat and said, come out to the barge, you're seeing what we do for a day. So I went out to the barge and I actually got dirty in those clothes. That was the key part of it. So I helped them tumble, I helped them identify what was going on with the organisms growing on the barge, and actually we wound up picking a bunch of mussels off the side of the barge that I got to bring home that night and eat for dinner. And that was when I kind of knew it was my spot. And from there, I worked there for 2 or 3 years and I absolutely loved it. And for me, it was being outside is a key thing for me. Right now I do a lot of computer work, so I'm stuck behind the computer, but I try to get out as much as I possibly can, get outside and enjoy that. Also just working for something, like being able at the end of the day to look at your product and look at your shellfish and be like, I did that, I grew that, I sheltered this for its entire life, and now I'm able to see what I produced. So for me, it was very rewarding just to be able to look at something and see that I accomplished that, as well as helping out the environment. So knowing that what I was growing was benefiting the environment around me, which I had been very passionate about my whole life, was another benefit. So, and that's when I kind of was like, this is what I want to do, this is where I want to be. And that's when I decided to further my career and go get my master's on aquaculture. So that was yeah, that.
Yeah, for me, my first job was making friends. And yeah, it was making good money. And having a really good time, but you know, it wasn't. I was hearing stories about ups and downs, and you know, learning about climate change and how that might affect the species fishery, and you know, ended up not putting all my eggs in the vending basket to college. Able to put myself through school by doing things, and then. But yeah, before I even went to college, I was in high school. And that's when we first started farming oysters. Just saying, something to try to diversify a little bit. You know, to be very high tide. And so, you know, we had boats, we had skills working on water, we had, you know, friends in the area that were working on oyster farms, and we could go out and learn. And we did. This was me and 2 of my now ex-business partners from high school, and then we roped in my father as well as background working on the water and commercial fishing for oysters in Chesapeake Bay in Maryland. And yeah, we kind of have been growing that farm every year, you know, as I worked through my degree, and then when I graduated, I was like, well, what do I do? You know, I've got this farm that's kind of growing, but also this mechanical engineering degree. I haven't really figured out if I want to do mechanical engineering. I chose the degree because I liked working on motors and building things, and thought it would be, you know, another a safer career path. But you know, I figured I maybe I should do an internship. So last fall I did an internship. It was a really cool internship, but what I learned in that internship was actually ocean engineering. But what I learned in that internship is that I didn't want to sit at the kind of desk all day. So now I'm all in on the farm, trying to grow that business and looking to grow elephants too. You know, I'm still digging clams as well, but that's kind of been my path so far. What I really liked about it is how sustainable it seems compared to the commercial fishery. I always seem like they're having a net positive exploitative fishing. I also like the community. In the commercial fisheries, all the other fishermen are competitors, and a lot of them hate you, especially if you're new. And they say mean things to you, and they make you feel threatened. But I haven't felt that at all in aquaculture. We're not competing as much. The market is great. We all have our own seed to start the year in our place to grow it. So we're not competing for a finite resource as much as you are when you're going at it, plant plastic and other guys. So yeah, I've been really felt welcomed as a newcomer in the industry, and a lot of folks have been share tips and advice and take me out on my farm, show me how to do things better, and also support the state, obviously, the agriculture language program, the apprenticeship program as well, which is is new and more than this one summer. So I just really feel supported as a newcomer in this industry, and feel like I'm doing something right. So yeah, that's one of mine.
So thinking back to, Max and Smokey, when you first started your farm, and Carissa, when you first had those first initial internships or jobs in the aquaculture space, thinking back to that time, what was something that sticks out in your mind that you learned about that experience when you were first starting out? Could be positive, negative, both. But what was that learning experience like when you were first getting into the industry?
It was all pretty new to me. I didn't have a background in working on the water, particularly. I had worked after college. I had worked as a carpenter, building houses, so that helped when we build our agriculture gear, rafts and barges and cages that we built out of wood initially. First learning experience. Well, it was encouraging to raise animals and see them come to market. I think our first oysters we brought to market in about 18 months, which was also a surprise to us, that we could get them to a market size that quickly. I don't know, just little bits of pieces of information that I learned. One of my favorite things was there was a fellow who ran a wharf. We've operated out of a wharf in South Bristol since we started the business. One of our locations. We move all our oysters from the growing area, which is in the upper Damariscotta, to a site that's just below the Darlington Expo down, called Clark's Cove. And it's 4 miles from the ocean instead of 12 miles. So we let the oysters recuperate after the harvest. We have wet inventory. They take up the water of the lower river, which is deeper, cleaner, saltier water, improves their condition. And the fellow that ran the wharf was the first aquaculture, shellfish aquaculture guy in Maine, in license number 1 to grow oysters and mussels. And he was kind of a sage, and we bounced ideas off of him. And he taught me the rule of 12, which is one of my favorite things. Maybe some of you already know about that, but the rule of 12, it has to do with the tides. And so the tide is high, and then 6 hours later, the tide is low. So the 12-hour shifts. But the rule of 12 has to do with the flow of the water between high tide and low tide. So let's say it's dead low tide right now, and the tide is beginning to rise. So the first hour of that 6-hour cycle, 1/12 of the water comes in on the flood tide. The second hour of that 6-hour cycle, 2/12 of the water comes in. On the third hour, 3/12. On the fourth hour, 3/12. On the fifth hour, 2/12. And on the last hour, 1/12. And then you're at high tide and tide is slack again. So when you break that number down, you look at the 2 hours in the middle, hour number 3 and hour number 4, You have 3/12 and 3/12, that's 6/12, that's 1/2. So in 2 hours, half of the water comes in, the other 4 hours, the other half is distributed. So that tells you how hard the current is going to be. You have slack tide at the flow and at the low tide and high tide, but you have a real strong current in that middle 2 hour period. It also tells you how fast the water is going to change from low tide to high tide. So if you look at the hour of the tide and you're in the first hour, it's not really change very much. If you're in the middle, you know that you're going to see the tide change a couple of feet in just an hour. This is all before we had our little pocket tide charts that tell us more than we can possibly remember about the tide. It's just kind of a good rule. When you're out there and you're stuck on a mud flat, you can take a pretty good guess as to when the boat is going to float again, or what the current is doing it into the rule of twelve.
Yeah, I didn't know about that. No, I'm definitely gonna use it.
It's handy.
Yeah.
You just keep it in mind.
For me, there's a lot of learning experiences early on. I think one of the biggest ones for me is kind of like just highlighting some differences between like commercial fishery and aquaculture, and like digging clams, hauling traps, whatever. You work hard. Generally, the harder you work, the faster you can put mud, the faster you can turn over traps. The more you're gonna get paid. With aquaculture, you can get pretty creative though. And one thing that we found early on is we were like hand grading oysters by dipping them through a mesh and just by hand shaking back and forth, back. It only goes so fast, but you can get more people in to help you out, and you can get through the oysters. Then we heard about this thing called a tumbling machine, and someone showed us their tumbling machine and how it can do a lot of that grading, shifting work for you. And we took a week, my dad and I, to put one of these together out of an old dump truck tart motor and a drainage pipe that we drilled a ton of holes into. And then it just saves so much labor to have this machine that can do that. And we're still using the machine to this day. And it's something that you like, because of the rules of like digging clams, for example, you're only allowed to use a clam hoe. You have to bend over and stick your nose in the mud and work hard. That was a way to do better. Like with aquaculture, there's a lot of ways you can do better. People are always coming up with new ideas, new gear types, new technologies, new genetics, all of these different opportunities. And there's regulations, sure, that can slow you down in the development of new technology. So it seems like it's just a little bit more creativity and figure out how to do things smarter. And when you're doing it smarter, you're doing it faster, whatever. You're not. It's not like you're extracting a wild resource, right? You end up farming more, and it's not like it's competing for stuff, right? So it seems like it's have creative ideas to try some out.
I'll echo that. I've been the aquaculture sector, the most innovative sector I've ever been involved in. And which is my job now, I get to go visit a lot of different farms. And the way different farms have jerry-rig solutions is absolutely amazing. And I love finding out those little mini projects that people have done to save themselves time or energy or money. It's just, yeah, it always really impresses me how innovative people are. I'll also say one thing that I learned, I don't know if you guys have had this conversation yet, but like having the right gear is very important. So having a good set of boots you can rely on, good set of socks, good set of sunglasses. My sunglasses their brand is Peppers, and they actually have coats on each of them, which is saved me when I fell in the water. I didn't have to scramble for my sunglasses. But yeah, always being prepared for the weather outside is super important because that can make or break your day, honestly.
And so, keeping that in mind is very important. Just thinking about the entirety of your career path now, or something you've experienced in the past. What has been something about working in this industry that's challenged you or surprised you?
Good question.
Take your breath
You're surprising me. I wanted to just take off on something that Max just said. Can I avoid you, like a politician avoids the question?
I'll allow it.
Max was saying, developing the grading oyster seed by hand, something we started doing, and in some of our, at some levels, we still do. We have these boxes that fit inside a fish tote. We can grade the oysters by shaking the box in the water of the fish tote, small and fall through, and they want to retain on the screen. We do that when the oyster is very small still. But we did develop a hand-propelled drum grader at one point that you dump in a bucket of seed. You stand there and you turn the crank for about 5 minutes, and the seed goes down through the drum, drops into a couple of different sizes, or 3 different sizes. A drain pipe, a big green drain pipe with lots of holes. Actually, we didn't drill all the holes. We drilled big holes and then put mesh inside. So, and then you could change the mesh size as well, or have more than one size mesh. And we used that for a number of years. And we sometimes would hire somebody really to just stand on the raft and crank the darn drum grader. But we ran a lot of seed through that drum grader. That was at the nursery stage, not at the market size. We generally hand grade the market oysters, and we've tried mechanical grading, but it doesn't grade it to where we want it exactly. So you end up regrading it by hand. So we just let go of the mechanical grading at that point. But then we also a number of years ago bought a mechanical grader off the shelf. It's made in Chesapeake Bay, and it has a big hopper that you can dump, depending on the size of the oyster, about hundreds of thousands of seed into the hopper. There's a conveyor that drives the oysters from the hopper up into a chute that then drops them into the drum grader. And the drum grader is made of aluminum now, and it has holes of different sizes, 2 different sizes. So the smallest ones fall out through the first set of holes. The next size falls out through the second set of holes. And the largest size falls out through the third set. And we actually have 3 different drums that are interchangeable with different size holes in the drum grader. So a lot of our technology has developed like that. We have upwellers that we built. And our first upweller it had 3 silos, and it was only, say, this long and this wide, and it was tied to the end of the wharf and had a little pump and it pumped water through. Actually, that was the second one. The first one was a tidal driven, then the little mechanical upweller marina, and then that wasn't big enough, so we built a larger one with 10 silos. It was a lobster tank that we drilled holes in, sunk the lobster tank into the water, and we could plug the holes and raise the tank up to clean it. Silos sat in the tank, and that worked well for a few years, and then we decided to go to a larger system entirely, which has larger silos and has the silos actually sit in the water themselves, tank around just a frame of that, and a propeller pump that pushes water out of a trough that draws water to silos. And then a few years ago, we developed, in addition to that, a bottle upweller system that we use for the right out of the hatchery seed. So we pump water mechanically out of the river, and they're in acrylic tubes that are about 4 inches in diameter and about 2 feet in height. And when the seed comes out of the hatchery, 2 million oyster seed that are 2 millimeters in size, they only fill about 6 of the tubes. But within a week, we're into 12 tubes. And then next week, we're into 18 tubes. Then we're into all 24 tubes are full, and they're overflowing within a few more days. putting it into the larger one. So that's 4 generations of upwellers and 3 generations of graders. And who knows what's down the road.
All of that technology developed in response to solving a problem or a challenge that you come across, so.
Yeah, and
Great.
we didn't develop it out of clean air. I mean, we borrowed technology here and there. Got ideas from it. Some of it we were innovating ourselves more. Some of it we were copying. And as Max said, the oyster growing community is helpful. We all share ideas. We're not a threat to each other and work as a team. The threat comes from outside. The aquaculture community. Not right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'd just like to echo what Timothy and Max said about how the aquaculture community is just so open and sharing, and I learned a lot about it making the main aquaculture's website. Is we did a lot of user testing to make sure that we were actually putting things on the site that farmers were going to use and that they wanted. So basically, we checked all of our preconceived notions at the door, and everything you see on that site is something that a farmer asked for. And that is why part of things the site's so successful. But one of the things that we wanted to capture was when we asked farmers, who do you go to for if you're looking for information, like who's your number one source to go to? And the answer every single time was another farmer. It was a farmer up the river or a farmer across the bay. That was their number one source to get information from. And so we tried to recreate that with our industry perspectives pages on there, getting information that is basically anecdotal information that's just shared on the water. And I think that that is such a unique aspect of the aquaculture industry that you don't really see that in any other industry that's out there. So I really love that about here, and also how much the aquaculture industry works with the academic and scientific community with fisheries. They're very skeptical of scientists and of academic communities. They have their reasons. I'm not going to say they don't, but working with aquaculturists, they have a problem, they'll come to me and say, hey, I have this problem, can you help me fix it? And having that kind of symbiosis is helping to create a better industry and move us all forward in the right direction, which is really, really nice.
For me, the biggest challenge has, been a big surprise. I think it was a challenge because it was. So for us right now, we started on the purpose aquaculture license, 400 square feet. License is easiest to get from the Department of to start farming. And then, we worked with those for a couple of years and then applied for a standard lease once we figured out a good area and, good year type that works for us. And now we're a couple of years later and we still haven't heard back about that. We're trying to grow this business, but we haven't received our standard lease. So now we're on 13 limited purpose aquaculture licenses. We're all over up and down the river. We can only have them 1,000 feet away from each other, and we're maxed out in terms of the amount of the people we have in the company, the amount of licenses that we can hold, and we're stuck. And so we're waiting to hear back about our lease, but that's been the biggest challenge is getting a lease and how long it's taken. A couple of years at this point, and we're hoping by the end of summer we'll have it, but and then be able to kind of expand the business and breathe a little bit. But right now it's like we're still limping along with these limited purpose aquaculture licenses because it's been harder to get a lease for good reason. First off, it should be hard to get a lease. You're taking public water and you're getting the exclusive right to farm that area. That's what you're doing for the lease, and other people can't use it how they use that water how they you might have just to use it, so we really try to minimize the conflict there with the plot, but, yeah, it has made it difficult for running the business, and operating the business, because we don't have, so, and I didn't see it coming. I thought, when we applied, it was taking, between maybe a year to get, a standard lease. That's what we thought. And then it's now 2+ years, to three and a half, to get a lease. But that's in part due to, the Department of Marine Resources doesn't have the funding and the staff to get through all of these leases and do it fairly. And there's been such an explosion in the number of applications for the growth of the industry. So it's kind of sucks. We'll get it eventually. We're pretty high up on that list. So we'll see.
I have a few more just closing out questions, but before I ask that, wanted to open it up to all of you. If there's anything interesting about their job now, their career trajectory, you want to know, any advice that they can give you that would be helpful as you're sort of navigating next steps in the aquaculture industry, or just anything personal that you want to ask, please feel free to ask.
I have a question for Max, just on the fact that is there a limit? So it's based on the number of people you have, how many LPs you get, but is there you're taking up 13 different spots when you're just trying to apply for one, right? That's sort of the message.
13 small spots when we would like one big spot, but now we're driving all over the river, and it's hard to organize things. And some places work good, and some places don't work that great. You can have up to 4 licenses per person.
It does. I just, it's sort of mind blowing to think that the state, or is it the government, the state, and that's in charge of this? It's just mind boggling to think that they can look at someone doing that much to just try to get one.
Yeah. Well, one reason is the LPAs are renewed on a yearly basis, whereas you might have a standard lease. So let's say 400, I don't even know, 400 square feet is a very, very small fraction of an acre. But when you ask for a standard lease and you have to renew your 400 square foot license every year, but when you ask for a standard lease, you can get up to 100 acres at a time, or up to 20 years. So you're asking for a lot, but in terms of square footage, impact on wherever you are, I mean, right now it would make a lot of sense just for us to be all in one spot. It doesn't make sense. It'll make sense. It's going to take a while. We're going through the process.
But don't ask for 100.
Yeah, but don't ask for it.
Don't do it.
I mean, that's you won't get it. It'll make a lot of people.
So part of the reason it's taking so long is because with the LPA it's a lot faster process. Like Max said, it's 400 square feet, really it's what the radar. But when you're doing a lease, you have to dive inside. They have to check the bottom to make sure what's going on there, that you're not impeding on any fuel grass or anything in that area. It's more inclusive, so you have to go and knock on your riparian landowner's doors, tell them that you're putting in a lease here. There's lease hearings, so if people don't approve of your lease for one reason or another, they show up to lease hearings, that causes things to go longer, delays. So that's kind of what's happening, is that the industry has grown so much that there are more people that are applying for leases and trying to get away from the LPAs. But there's also more eyes on the aquaculture industry as well, which is starting to slow down that process on purpose to create these delays to try to discourage people from being a part of it. And so there's some outside influences that are causing these state-run delays, on top of the state not being fully funded, on top of the state not having a full staff. So it's yeah.
Other questions? Want to know about starting a farm, choosing, if you get a master's degree to go on anything.
Me, Maine oyster food.
That's good.
Yeah, I'm sure there is. I could tell you some stories. Of this. One of my favorite stories was going down to the wharf one day in the winter. And there's an old fellow I was talking about, his name was Ted Myers, who was the first agriculturalist. And we got down to the wharf and looked out across the cove, and it was ice all the way out to our boat on the water. And we had at the time 25-foot lobster style boat. Harvested, and we were going to go out to harvest, and we couldn't get, as far as we could see, we couldn't get to the boat. And Ed came down and looked at us, scratching our heads on the wharf, and he said, "Why don't you catch? Huh? Why don't you just catch out to the boat?" I don't know what that means. He said, "Go up to the boat shop, the boat shed there, grab an anchor, get some line, tie the line to the anchor, get in your pea pod, and set it down into the ice. The ice will probably break because it's soft salt ice, and throw the anchor as far as you can. Let it catch in the ice. Pull your boat to the anchor, and when you get there, throw it again. Pull it up. After 3 or 4 throws, we were able to catch our way to the mooring and climb in the boat. And there was no ice, in the main part of the river. It was just a cove that had frozen. So I learned about catching, and I always thought that was kind of a good metaphor for a problem. Just catch your way out.
Amazing. What is your favorite part of your job? What is it that you like best? What do you do?
Well, I think Max and I would certainly say being in Clarissa, we said this to being outdoors, being on the water, being outdoors. There's certain times of the year that maybe a desk job is not so bad after all. When your hands and your feet are freezing, or the wind's blowing 20 knots and it's 0 degrees out. It's too cold to be out in the water trying to get to work, or the wind is blowing so hard that you spend 3 or 4 times as much energy to do the same task as you would on a calm morning. But I just being outside, on the water, outdoors. Where we farm, the water temperature in the summer gets up to 75 degrees, and so on a hot summer day, it's never too hot. You just jump in and cool in. I love swimming. Do that quite a lot.
I would say this is true of when I worked on the farm and in my job now, is that I'm always learning new things. And that's my goal in life, to be a lifelong learner. And I feel like this industry is the perfect way to do that.
Yeah, I would say, aside from just like the day-to-day, being outside, right? Like that's working outside, like that is my day-to-day, and that is amazing. And I feel like you really are connected with the environment. You're working with the guys, you're working with the other stories inside of there. You're friends with the seals that are hanging out around your float and whatnot, and it's like that feels great. But with aquaculture, it feels like coming from commercial fisheries, like I feel like I'm really building something that's meaningful, that's sustainable, and I think building this aquaculture business feels great to be able to support people in the industry and share the way of life and the meaning behind the work. And yeah, it's really fun.
One last question I have, and then if anybody else has any questions. What's one piece of advice that you would give to this year's cohort of aquaculture pioneers? What's one thing that they should know entering this summer experience.
Yeah, just keep your ears and your eyes open and see what's going on. Yes. Take in as much as you can. You're not gonna learn everything there is to know one summer. And, but you have a life ahead of you to do that. But don't be afraid to ask questions. People always say to me, I know this is a stupid question. I just want to say, no, if you're asking the question, it's not stupid. It's if you're trying to figure something out. So don't be afraid to ask a stupid question. It's not a stupid question. No question. It's good to ask questions. That's how you learn. You learn by watching, listening, and asking questions.
Yeah, I guess it would just be taking as much as you can and as much as you're able to and share that knowledge with other people as well. So as much as you're learning, talk to your family members, talk to your friends about it, and just spread that knowledge around because the more we share knowledge about aquaculture and what's going on the water, the more people will understand it and be willing to accept it as part of the work.
I think the investments in nice sun protection. You're gonna be out there, like if you're fair skinned like yourself, you're gonna get burnt skin socks. So I like invest in like I wear my hat and like a thin sun shirt. It's like a polyester, like a hood, covers me all up, stay nice and covered, and I don't get burnt. Figure out something that works for you. And wearing sunscreen reapply because I can like get burnt bad for a while. So yeah, my dad's always getting doing my sunscreen, making really kind of squints, and it's got like crazy wrinkles and like it's always getting like stuff cut off. So like cancerous parts. So my younger brother has had that. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, you can't. Most people can't. Outmuscle the sun.
You guys have heard cocktails, right? Water. Any of these folks like have any follow-up questions for you? Maybe as they're like starting their internship, would they reach out to you? Well, Smoky Max, Carissa, thank you so much for your time and sharing your story. I really appreciate it.